Hey, E.G. Spirit here, and so today's topic came about because of a viewer comment on my regular channel video, Elder Gal, and it was when I kind of waxed philosophical about the idea that when things happen a certain way, they were probably meant to happen that way because when you look at what has already happened, what is already in the books, basically, my theory was that that's the way things are supposed to transpire if that's the way they happened. So I had a viewer comment that they thought that I had a very fatalistic approach or fatalistic attitude. Fatalism is basically saying everything is preordained. We can't do anything to change anything and that sort of thing. So I thought I would address that on here because it's not so clear cut. It's not black or white on this. And so I wanted to explain my perspective, which I couldn't really get into in that brief bit I did on the previous video. So the title of this video is, Are Our Lives Predetermined? So I would say yes and possibly no. And the reason I'm saying that is because I believe to some degree things are predetermined, and I think we also have free will to some degree. Now, to me, it's on a continuum, it's on a spectrum. It's not like it's one thing or the other. I think it's a little bit of both. Now, let me preface all this by a disclaimer in saying I am obviously not an expert on all of this stuff. I am still a student of spirituality. I am still learning. I still have questions. And I'm not putting this forth as like I'm a guru and I know everything at all. Never would do that. And so I'm just offering my perspective, my thoughts, my beliefs based on my knowledge and experience. That's all I can really do. So back to this topic of, are our lives, predetermined? Well, there's many different ways to look at that. And actually, I'm going to start with a really interesting one, which a lot of spiritual people, when channelers were a big thing and a lot of people were doing channeling and stuff. Well, there was this channeled being called Emmanuel, Emmanuel, and I actually saw this. It was a woman who was channeling this being who I don't know if he was a he or she. Honestly, I don't know, but the woman who channeled it was a woman, and I went to one of her seminars and it was really fascinating. I mean, there was something interesting going on there that I couldn't explain. So, but she did some books called, Emmanuel. I think there's 2 books at least. There might be more. And I don't have them with me anymore. I had them, they're in my bin in my storage unit. But I've read them enough to know basically what they say. Now, in her philosophy, based on this channeled being, life, this reality, this world we're living in right now is a schoolroom. It's like a schoolroom. It's a learning environment, which means that we come into this world primed to learn, and there are lessons we have to learn. We have to learn how to access our higher selves, to become more spiritual beings as we move along. And I don't even remember, honestly, if the book discusses reincarnation. It might. But I don't think you necessarily have to believe in reincarnation to believe that if this is a schoolroom, then when we graduate from this, we go on to other dimensions, other dimensions of reality. So I don't think of reincarnation as necessarily being on the same plane of existence on this planet necessarily as being in what I consider higher realms of existence. And in addition to Emmanuel, who talks about it being a schoolroom, there's other philosophers and spiritual teachers that talk about the fact that when we come into this reality, when we're born or before we're born, that we actually get to choose our life. In other words, we get to choose where we're born and what situation we're born into and what potentially can happen to us. Now, I don't know that I 100% believe in this, but I tell you, It's very compelling. It's a very interesting philosophy because it would explain so much about the fact that this being a schoolroom, and so bad and good things will happen in the schoolroom. It's not a positive environment, and it's not about God punishing people. It's about the fact that you have lessons to learn, and some of those involve a lot of discomfort and pain and, whatever you have to go through in your life. So in the theory that we choose our lives, then according to this, people are given a choice before they come into this dimension. And they're basically asked, do you want, they're showed me, I don't know, maybe they're shown several images or several possible scenarios. I'm not really sure how it all works. But then that makes more sense about all the horror and the tragedy and the just the nightmarish situations that occur in our world and have occurred in our world for thousands of years. Because I never really believed that God does that. I don't believe that God says, oh, I'm going to punish these people or do this to these people. Or, and of course, I always think about the Holocaust where, so many millions of innocent souls were tortured and killed. And I think, well, why would God do that? But maybe there was a reason for the lessons of the schoolroom, why that particular event had to happen. And if it's true, and I don't know if it is, I'm just putting this out there as a potential theory, that if you were a person who died in the Holocaust, you were given a choice before you were born. And that choice was, you're going to come into this world and you're going to have, let's say, a good life until you're 15 years old. And then you're going to be put in a concentration camp. And then you're potentially going to die of illness, or you're going to be sent to a gas chamber, or whatever horrible thing was going to happen. But that you're given that choice before you're born. So you actually, and there's a reason, like ultimately what the philosophy about this is, it talks about the fact that when people do this, there's usually a resulting benefit in the sense that when they do die and go on to another dimension, there is a reward for that spiritually for them. So why would people choose that? Well, they would choose that because they know it's a brief, in the span of our soul's existence, it is a brief moment in time, relatively, and that they are willing to do that for their spiritual growth. So that's kind of what the theory talks about. Now, I would like to believe it. I'm a person that is innately a skeptic about a lot of things, so it's hard for me to totally buy in, but it does explain so much when you think about the fact of why do all these bad things happen in the world? Why do so many people have to suffer? What does it all mean? It does give some perspective and some meaning to that. So that's one aspect of this, about the whole idea of things being predetermined. That if there is a system in place where it all does make sense, then maybe it is easier for us to understand and accept in some way. So there's that aspect of it. Now, when we come back to how much of it is free will, well, I do believe that humans have free will. We do have choices that we can make. We can choose path A or path B. But does that mean that if we choose path A, that it's going to come out exactly like we expect? No. And the same with path B. The point is, there's always aspects to whatever choice we make that are not within our control. So there's always an aspect of something that's predetermined in some way. In other words, whether you choose A, B, or C, or all the way to F or Z, there's always going to be other potential things that can happen along the way that we have no control over. So that is what I believe, in the sense that you are never going to totally control everything. No one is ever able to control, as long as you're in a human body and living in this reality, you are never going to be able to control everything. You can only control so much, but what you can control is very powerful. You do control the way you look at things, and you control your attitude and your behaviors. In other words, how you react to things. That is within your control. That is not predetermined. That is part of your spiritual growth to make that choice. So the choices you make in particular are especially important when it comes to attitude and behavior, because it is the only thing in which we really have 100% control over. So when people, say something like this viewer did about, oh, you're obviously a fatalist, and I don't believe that. No, I'm not 100% a fatalist. I do believe we have tremendous control over the way we view things and the way we deal with things, and even some of the choices that we make. But I also believe a great deal of what goes on in the world is not under our control. We are not going to be able to change the course of events in a certain circumstance. And random things will seemingly happen to random people. And we don't know, we'll never know while we're still in this reality exactly why that happens. So I hope that explains it a little better. I do believe, though, again, first of all, there's very few things I believe 100% in a spiritual sense. One of them is that our soul is eternal. I believe that. I believe our soul never dies. I believe there is another reality or realities after this one. And I believe that completely. I believe in God or a higher power, some intelligent, loving, all-powerful force that exists in the universe. I believe in that. That's what I 100% believe in. Everything else that I have some belief in, or partial belief, or a little bit of skeptical belief, those are all varying degrees of beliefs, but they're not always 100%. And I'm just being honest and real on here, as I try to be on my other channel as well. But I did want to explain this a little more, to say that it's not a simple black or white answer about, are our lives predetermined? To some degree they might be, but to some degree they might not. And there are different theories. I encourage you, if you're interested in this topic, to research some things. I gave you the name Emmanuel. I encourage you to read, I think her name was Pat Rodegast, who channeled Emmanuel. And I encourage you to read the books because they're really beautiful. It's a very simple way of explaining like what's going on in this particular reality we call, Earth. And but I encourage you to, if you're interested in this topic, to continue to research it for yourself and come to your own conclusions. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm just telling you what I believe. And I can only answer for myself. I would never push anything on anyone else. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just sharing with you different perspectives that might get you to think and want to explore other things on your own. So I'm hoping that's helpful in some way, and it explains my philosophy a little more. And until next time, be kind and take care of yourselves.